Welcome to Speak with Purpose, a celebration of thought and influence, where bold ideas ignite action. Join Chrisine Gagnon and the TEDxCatawba community in shaping the future.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chrisine Gagnon, founder and organizer of TEDxCatawba. We're here today to introduce one of our esteemed speakers for our 2025 event to be held here in Hickory, North Carolina on June 14th at the Drendel Auditorium. I'm joined today by Schele Williams. She is a Broadway veteran, director, and author committed to cultivating work with authentic representation on and off stage. She made her Broadway directorial debut in 2023 with The Notebook, co-directed with Michael Greif, and the highly anticipated Broadway revival of The Wiz. Her upcoming directing projects for the stage include Disney's revival of Aida and Hidden Figures, as well as Rebel Girls, the musical. Welcome, Schele. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me today.
It is a pleasure to be here, Chrisine.
Congratulations on all this wonderful success.
Thank you.
I'm sure it's keeping you very, very busy.
Yeah, I don't sleep a lot. I will tell you that. Yeah.
Oh, I think I'm joining that club. So I would love to introduce you to our audience, to our community, and maybe touch on where it all began. So did you always know, like since the age of 3 or 4, I want to be a Broadway director, or was it not such a linear path?
It was not remotely a linear path. What I did know is that I liked to hold the stage. So from the time I was like 3 years old, my mom got me in dance classes. And as she likes to say, she got every class that she could afford because I was such a precocious child. So I did tap, acrobatic, ballet. Like I was like anything she could put me in all day, all the time to keep this kid busy is what I did.
I love that. That just reminded me of a flashback of my parents had these aspirations that I would, take the stage. And my dad, he brought me to gymnastics. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be great. It's gonna be so easy. I had to do a run up to the parallel or the uneven bars, and I ran up to it. I cried. And then I stood there like a deer in headlights. And my dad's like, now we're going to go home. So then they tried to put me in ballet, and they tried to put me in jazz, and they tried to help me with piano lessons, and it kind of went on and on and on. So I love hearing that story of someone who had a different experience. I mean, it's not for the lack of trying on my part. I guess it's just I'm much better at accountant, with the calculator and things like that. So tell me.
I love a glittery costume. I love all the recital day with the hair and the makeup and the costume and the shoes and the picture. I loved it all. And then I sang in church, like anything I could do that felt artistic felt really good to my soul.
And tell me then about your educational background. So you, clearly we talked kind of offline about some of your passions on and off the stage. And so maybe walk me through a little bit of your adolescent to later adolescent journey and kind of where that led you on your path.
Absolutely. My dad is a professional drummer. He's the drummer for the Ohio Players and had, incredible success. The band is still going, but, we have gold and platinum albums all over our walls, at home.
Wow.
He's very, very gifted drummer. And when I picked up the drumsticks, I was in the 5th grade and I had the gift. I was like, it was like hand in glove. And I was like a little bit of a drum prodigy as a kid as well. And so very quickly I went I got into a performing arts school. It was a music magnet at the time, being piloted in Dayton, Ohio. And I went from, never holding sticks. By the time I was in the 8th grade, I was captain of the high school band.
Wow.
And I was playing like college solos. And when I was 16, I played the first youth series concert at Carnegie Hall with my friend Steve Reinecke, who is now the conductor of the New York Pops. He and I, both from the Dayton, Ohio area, were in youth orchestra together as kids. And I thought that music was going to be my path. I played in the pit orchestra of a lot of shows and for community theaters. Once in a while, I would do the onstage show if I felt like, auditioning. But for the most part, I loved being in the pit and I loved playing the music until my senior year. I auditioned for The Wiz, and everything in my body, like all of my molecules were like, oh, it's really
Wow.
nice up here. I want to be on stage and I love it. And that's
So it
where
was
I
the
made a big
same
shift.
vibe. It was
It was the
that
same
I
vibe.
want to be on stage. This is my calling. That's where you feel like home.
Yeah.
Versus
And I think,
I want to crawl into the podium and I
yeah,
want to.
well, I mean, it was so interesting because I think a little bit of it had to do with I was always going to be chasing the dragon of being Diamond's daughter. He's such
Hmm.
a like amazing drummer, but I think a part of it was how do I find my own artistic voice outside of his shadow? So when I really did actually love performing and being on stage, I felt like this is something that can be my own and no one will compare me to him. So I think that had a
Ah.
little bit to do with making that jump.
That makes sense to me. Were your parents disappointed, or how did they take when I'm sure they had a vision for you as the prodigy maybe, and so I never I think I probably had to share a little bit a desire to do more in writing and in English lit than I did
Hmm.
on the business side, but I sort of caved and kind of did what I was expected to do, or at least that's how I recall it in my memory. I was a little too bashful to be like, no, I want to write because my parents wouldn't have the appetite for that. And maybe they would now, but back then. So tell me, how did that go?
It was incredibly awkward. They had spent like 13 years of private lessons, and like there was a whole path. I had scholarships to college. Like there was an incredibly difficult moment when I said to them, I want to make a big shift in my life. And to their credit, one, from my dad's lived experience, he was a musician, and then he felt like when I was born, he needed to take, everyone was like, you have to get a real job now, because he was playing like in bands, and he went into construction, and he was so miserable
Oh,
that the story goes that my mom's mom, my grandmother, said to my mom, Jimmy is a musician and you are working. He needs to be happy or he will punish you for it for the rest of his life.
oh my
And
gosh.
and my mom said to my dad, you know what? You need to follow your heart and you need to be a musician. That's who you are. And he, the very next year got into the Ohio Players and then they took off. Like it was the greatest version of what happens when you follow your dreams.
Hmm.
So I think, they can't unknow that. When I said to them, I really want to do this, and they knew me and they knew that it was like to my core, this is where I belonged. And they'd also seen me on stage and seen me shine on stage and really saw something new in me that they supported and encouraged me and helped me find a path to. And now I have to get private lessons and I have to study and I
Hmm.
have to make a new college plan, and like all of those things had to happen, and they happened, and I got a scholarship to college in New York. And so I took a really interesting gap year and found my bliss and changed my career path, and it has been an incredible journey.
That is fantastic. I love this idea that you should love your work and be passionate about it. I think I was watching a Simon Sinek, I think it was, piece yesterday about how he believes it's a right that people should love their jobs and love what we do. Unfortunately, I just don't think that the majority is in that position. So it's
Yeah.
lovely and brave, I think, to be able to step forward and say, no, this is really my path, and then to really live that. And you're so fortunate to have your father kind of having gone through that himself and then applying that logic to you. So that's great. I don't want to give away everything on your talk because I know we're behind the
Mhm.
scenes planning something that I think will be absolutely fabulous. So I would like to fast forward. So I think the audience is aware that I am, we already talked about I'm not very artistically inclined despite my, desire to be. So when we first met, I think I'd asked you some naive questions like, what is a producer versus director, and what does that mean, and how do you do, and how does this work? And so could you maybe level set for someone else in the audience who might have the same question, like, what is your life like when you say you are going to direct, or you did direct The Notebook. Like, walk us through, what does that entail, and like, what do you love most about that? Or maybe what do you not love most about that?
It can start a couple different ways. It either starts with a conversation, which is I have an idea for a show, and we are going to build out this concept. And I like to be in from the ground floor. Like, I like to be in with writers, and composers very, very early on. I'm working on a project right now where it had a concept, there was IP involved, and we started to build it out from that stage. There's also the version where I read a script. They're looking for a director. They hand me a script. I read the script, and the script really speaks to me. And, for a script to speak to me, I have to know why it is important in this moment to tell this story, and why I feel like I'm the person who has a unique perspective to bring to it. So if I can answer those questions, and it feels like a good fit, and I also think that the collaborators are people that I want to spend years of my life with, that's a big factor. My happiness, it is really entrenched in the decisions I make, knowing that everything isn't going to be like Pollyanna and we're not going to be kumbaya and agree on everything the whole time. But knowing that the people that I'm building something with, that these are people that I respect, that we can disagree respectfully, that we can come up with creative solutions, that we can meet every challenge with respect and dignity and grace, for and with each other. Those things are really important to me, because making art is so deeply personal. And I've had the converse where I have made art with people who've made it miserable for me. And what I don't want to be is miserable in something that I love, right? So you find a piece, I find a piece that I absolutely love, and then we go on the journey of honing that piece as much as we can. And then we do things like readings where we invite actors to read it out loud, so we can, hearing it in our minds and hearing it out loud really does shift the way we think moments play. And then, we hire really smart actors who give us new perspectives on it because they're inside the piece. So then the piece continues to shift. And on a musical, that process can go 4 and 5 years. A musical usually takes from the page to the stage about 6-7 years to go from page to stage. Plays can be a little shorter. They can be 3 or 4 years, but it is a real chunk of your life that's why I'm like, picking partners really does matter. And you'll go through a series of readings, and then you'll do something called a workshop, which is when you put it on its feet, and it's with, it's almost like playing pretend. You've got a folding chair, and you're like, okay, and this folding chair is the bed in your bedroom. And, you just like, you don't have any real set pieces. You've just got little things that you're moving around, tables and folding chairs. And, you've got a glass in your hand, and it's meant to be a bottle of champagne or whatever. But just gives you a feel of what it will look like. And then, typically you'll do a regional theater production. And when you start to get into the actual production, you're adding on your fellow collaborators, your set designers, your costume designers, your hair designers, your sound designers. And as all of these designers come along, a choreographer, like all of these, if it's a musical, the composer's been there the whole time, an orchestrator and a band, and it just grows and grows and grows. My job is to continue to articulate a vision that keeps everyone on a true north. Everyone can read something and get like a different impression of what it should be. But my job is to ensure that we are all telling the same story in one accord, and that everyone's artistry is working at its heightened place, that they are challenging me, I am challenging them, and that we are creatively growing as artists as we tell this story together. Theater is 100% a collaboration and negotiation. And it is incredible to be the captain of that ship as it is, making its way towards its destination, which is an audience.
I love that. And you were also captain of the band a long time ago. There's a trend from childhood here. I see a trend. I didn't actually know page to stage could be like 6 or 7 years. So I learned something new just now. That's incredible. I have a couple follow-up questions for you. So, I love imagining a day in the life of, so a couple questions. One is, I'm like a control freak, and
Be
and
a director.
right. So I'm wondering, like, how do you? There's so many details. I almost feel like it's like a fire hose. How do you conceptualize that, and then be able to, delegate appropriately? How do you get your head around that? I know it's an ambiguous question, but
No, it is the there's not one thing that is on that stage that has not gone through the eyes of the director. There are, when a costume designer is picking out costumes for a character, I'm looking at every earring, every shoe, every purse, every hat, every dress, every
whoa,
pants. Like, I like this, I don't like this. I like the cut of this. I don't, like every single detail, every wig, every hair, like every style. If it's, the set design, we're looking at any kind of furniture, every prop, I have seen and approved every single thing that is on that stage and
wow,
made sure that everyone is working in concert, right? The designers are all talking to each other. So you'll never see anyone wearing like a green dress sitting on a green couch. Like all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, they're a gecko. Everyone's like talking, right? So that like the color patterns, all, palettes all work together. And we are telling a story, for example, if it's set like, in the 1930s, and we're representing, let's say, a family during that era, that every book on the bookshelf would be a book that the character would actually read, that everything in the house is something that this family's economic situation, according to the play, could actually afford, that we are, what's so unique and I think beautiful about theater is that you have full autonomy. Theater in itself is always immersive. You sit down in the space and the audience can always just look over there.
right.
In a movie, they tell you exactly where to look and where you can only look, right? They're like, I'm going to zoom all the way in on her eyes. And even if you wanted to know what was going on behind her, you don't have the option, right? They're not giving you the ability to look there. Whereas in theater, you can always look everywhere. And so with an audience having the ability to look around and go, huh, what's on that shelf over there? What pictures do they have? What's on the mantle? Everything has to be telling the story.
That is totally me. I don't watch TV very often, and when I do, I'm usually watching Bloomberg or something. But theater is just a whole different ball game. Every time I go to London in the summer, I'm always at the theater with my friends, and you're right. I'm kind of like, oh, let's look on that bookshelf. Oh, what's over there? And it's always just such an immersive experience. And one of the few times where I think I properly kind of disassociate when we're in the middle of a break, and I'm like, oh, where am I? Oh my gosh, I'm like not in this play. What? So
Yeah.
it's quite fabulous. Tell me about two. Is it that everything's set in stone, and then can you tweak things? Do you tweak things? Is tweaking something you do all the way up through opening day, after opening? Tell me how that works.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, a director's work is never done. If you gave a director 3 more days, we would take it. The interesting thing about theater is that no matter what, we have an audience. There's no like pushing out, the day that we're going to release like movies. I'm like, oh my gosh, you guys are going to release 2 months later. Like I know when I start the day I'm going to have, we call it butts in the seats.
Mm-hmm.
I have a preview date set. And from the time I begin to that preview date, we will make that date and we will do a show that day. So the timeline is very tight. When you get into previews, you will be changing the show constantly, mostly because you're doing the show for the sake of an audience. So the audience response, they're the missing character the whole time you're building it. Once you get an audience, you're like, oh, that doesn't work. Oh, that really works. You're
Oh,
now
interesting.
shifting because they're telling us something about the piece that you can't discover alone in a room, right? And so that's one part of it. And the other part of it is that you get a little bit of perspective. You're going so fast that you don't really get to zoom out and see the big picture with all the elements until pretty much an audience is there.
Mm.
And you go, oh, I want to work on that light cue a little bit more. I want to make this number a little bit more intimate. Let's get rid of a couple set pieces. Let's extend this dance number. I feel like I'm craving a little bit more of it here. All of those details are happening all the way through previews. And then right before previews end, there's a day when we freeze. And
Okay.
that's usually 4 or 5 days before opening, and that's when all the critics come. And the reason why you freeze
Ah,
is so that you're not messing with the cast and you're not messing with the show. They can do consistent shows for the critics. It's really hard to get a new show in the afternoon and have to perform it that night and know that, like, the New York
mm.
Times is watching you do it. Whereas in previews, and it has happened many times, you get a brand new song that afternoon and you are singing it, memorized, and acting it that night in front of an audience.
Oh, I would bomb. Oh my goodness. I give people so much credit. So if you and this is also a naive question, I'm sorry. If you freeze and then the critics come and I'm assuming that feedback is out there, do you ever tweak after as a result or no?
You typically know. You typically
Okay.
don't tweak after that. I mean, the big time, what's kind of funny is after a show has been running and you send out a national tour, oftentimes once the tour goes out, you'll come back and tweak Broadway because there are things that you want to do
Oh,
things that you get to do on the tour that you couldn't do. You ran out of time on the tour, but you have time on the you ran out of time on Broadway, but you have more time on the tour. So you
hmm,
like fix things and you clean them up and you feel better about that. And then you go, you know
I
what? I want to
see.
put that into the Broadway show. So then you call a rehearsal and you make some adjustments to the Broadway show. That happens. I have a show out. The Wiz is on tour right now, and there are some changes and some things that I made on the tour that I was dying to make on Broadway, and we just ran out of time.
And that was when, was that in March of this past year or February when we
Yeah,
were,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
you were full on because I remember we were talking and you're like, I have free time maybe on a Sunday between like 12 and 12:37. I'm like, well, that's very precise.
Like during a dinner break or something.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
because I think I saw you, and I went right to Connecticut to go check on the tour.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And remind me that story you told me, and I don't remember where this was in the timeline, but when you go to see one of your shows, you take notes, and how does that fit into that timeline when we were talking about that? Do you remember that?
Oh, that happens all the time.
Ah,
I'll go see the show in a couple weeks. Sometimes I'll let the cast know. Sometimes I'll just sneak right on in
it could
there.
be a surprise, like a
Yeah.
secret shopper director.
Yeah. I just show up and I take some notes and then I see them afterwards and they're like, oh, you were here. But, their job is to do consistent, beautiful shows. I get to see it as an audience member and
Hmm.
take notes and go in and rehearse for a day and leave.
Do you tweak at that point at all, or usually not?
Um, Sometimes minor tweaks.
Okay.
But typically nothing substantive, like no big song changes or anything like that.
I see. I see.
Yeah.
I can feel your passion for your work and it's really amping me up. I was watching a podcast yesterday. It was like, oh, our have friends that are batteries and not vacuums. You're definitely a battery. So you're charging me up today.
Well,
I
I'll
love
tell
it.
you, I do realize the privilege it is to do what you love. And I haven't always done what I love. I've had survivor jobs. I've done plenty of
Hmm.
things that I didn't love. But even when I was doing those, I knew I was getting back to something that I loved. Like it was a part of my journey. I always say like I have such a good hustle and I have just no shame in doing whatever I need to do to get back to the thing that I love. I mean, it was like waitering, whatever I needed to do. I'm like, I'm in because it's going to get me back to this thing. Um, and so because of that, when I'm able to do it like I am now, I am so filled with joy because it is fleeting.
Mm.
And so I never take it for granted. COVID, I was working on two Broadway shows when COVID hit. I was in rehearsals. We were in our fourth day of rehearsal when COVID hit for Aida. And I, I thought that was going to be the year that like everything was going to change. And it ended up happening, almost 4 years later. But
Right.
during that period of time, there was no theater. There were just conversations about what we were going to do when we got back. But I felt during that period of time the absence of something that I loved so much, something that was such a part of my identity, something that was such a part of, what gives me excitement to wake up in the morning, the impact of these incredible stories that I have the privilege to tell. that when the theater opened back up again, I thought, never ever will I ever take for granted how beautiful it is to do what I love and to be able to share, these gifts that I have been given to tell stories. Like I do feel like, I am incredibly blessed, and it's a wonderful thing.
I can't imagine how that felt during COVID because it's just so uncertain. Like, when will this open up again? You also remind me too of, I think you and I are the same in that some people ask me like, oh, in your career path, do you have regrets? And I'm like, absolutely not. Because I think if you pull a thread out, it just all unravels, right? I don't think I'd be here today doing what I love if it weren't for all the things that came before. And I think we won't, divulge all the aspects of your talk, but I think your passion and your joy, that clearly comes through. And that's what I wanted to share with our audience, is this passion through now this TEDx talk, which is a little bit of a different animal, right? In a good way.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe before we pivot on that, I'd love to know what you love about your job most.
The humans in every direction, right? The humans, the stories that we get to illuminate on stage. And the stories that I gravitate towards are stories that allow, humanity to grow, that exposes something that we don't see often, that empowers a group of people that don't always feel empowered, that illuminates something, inside us that makes us feel impassioned about something. Like the humans about the stories that we tell. And then there's the humans that I get to work with, the incredible artists that give their gifts to tell the stories. And then there's the humans that we get to share our stories with. This incredible, it's just the most incredible feeling to me to sit in a theater with 1,500 strangers and the lights go out and we go on a journey for 2 hours, 2.5 hours together. And then we all walk out with this unique experience that no one else will ever have. Other people will see the show, but no one else will ever see the show we all saw together. And that cycle of humanity to me is extraordinary.
I love that. And I love the shared experience, because you're right. Every time I walk out of the theater, probably 99.999% of the times, I'm like a little sad because I'm like, oh, our shared experience is over. So yeah. I hear you on that. What an interesting perspective. So I wanted to maybe pivot to your talk a little bit, and I know we're working on that behind the scenes, but can you tell me if there was one thing or two that you hope the audience takes away from your being on the stage, what would some of those key messages or themes be?
To really be fearless. That there is there is a story that we all tell every single day, and it's our own story. And there's certain things about our story that we can't control, right? Like we don't know when our story is going to end, right? But there are many things about our story that define how we are remembered, that define our legacy, right? And I think if we challenge ourselves to have a legacy that is bold, that is passionate, and that is fearless, then we have lived a good life.
Ooh, that's strong. I think our audience is going to really be in for a treat here. So, Schele, I think that's perfect. I think that's a perfect way to end this episode. So I wanted to sincerely thank you for joining us today. I know you're very, very busy, and we really appreciate you joining us on the TEDx stage this coming June.
I'm so excited. I can't wait.
Me too. We'll see you in just a couple months.
See you soon.
To all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Tune in next week for another episode of Speak with Purpose to get insights into our speakers, sponsors, and partners for TEDxCatawba. You can also learn more about our independently organized TEDx event and purchase your tickets on our website, TEDxCatawba.com. We're also on social media. It's TEDxCatawba. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X. Thank you so much, and see you next week.